Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening on OAB's Online Learning Hub, the first interactive learning platform in Oman. My name is Ayman Shahi, and I am Head of Learning and Development at Oman Arab Bank. We are running a series of online workshops that are focused on innovation, personal development, and career success. For more information about the workshops and find out how you can register, please follow us on our social media pages on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Today, we are delighted to be joined by Mr. Seddik Abdel Meguid, partner of Pentapyramid for Leadership Development and the solution partner of Harrison Assessment International, who will talk about understanding our blind spots. This is an interactive session. Therefore, if you have any questions during the presentation, please use questions into the chat window, and they will be read out loud and addressed by our speaker. If you would like to join the discussion at the end of the presentation, please raise your virtual hand and we will call on you. Or you can send the chat message to the group, everyone, and we will read the question out loud. Seddik, over to you.
Thank you, Ayman. And hi, good afternoon to all of you. And I hope you and your families are keeping safe and well. And happy National Day for all Omani people as well. I'm honored to be part of Oman Arab Bank Learning Hub, actually, for the third time with a new topic that you can take it from a business perspective or a personal perspective. I don't know if you hear me well, but sometimes when we have the camera on, the transmission is not okay. So I'm gonna stop the camera and I will start. But before we go into the topic of today, I would like to share with you 3 statements. If we agree or disagree on few thoughts related to our topic today, so I will share with you 3 statements and the new chat box for a panelist and participants. If you agree, type A, and if you disagree, type B in your chat box for all panelists and all participants. Okay? First one, our brains are overloaded with million pieces of information every second. Yet we can only process few of them. Do you agree or disagree? Mostly A. Okay, let's move to the second statement then. The second one is, nowadays, we need to think and act faster than ever before. Do you agree or disagree? All right, A. Mostly A as well. All right, move to the third one. Our past experience, our emotional and moral motivations, and our social influence are impacting the way we comprehend and the way we think. Do you agree or disagree? Okay, I got mostly A, 1B. So we're going to explore that. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, having said that, we will spend the coming almost 1 hour exploring 4 challenges our brain is facing that creates the blind spots. And here is the agenda. What do we mean by blind spots? Why should we care? And what should we do? Based on the few statements I shared with you, and most of you agreed with, psychologists also are saying that our brain is facing 4 challenges, which are too much information, not enough meaning, need to act fast, and knowing that what we should remember. Our brain filters the information overload, so the noise becomes signals. And when those signals are confusing us, our brains starts to fill in the gaps with some stories. And when we need to act fast, we jump into conclusions, and the story becomes decisions. And for us to handle those 4 challenges, our brain makes shortcuts. So we're wired to make cognitive shortcuts, and our unconscious mind can put us on an autopilot. Those shortcuts are called cognitive bias, or cognitive shortcuts, or cognitive error. And when we don't recognize them, they are called blind spots. Let's explain that further. So what is a blind spot? Blind spot is unconscious bias that can narrow our vision and potentially influence our behaviors. Or the definition I really like most is blind spot is a defense mechanism which prevents us to recognize our feelings because recognizing them would become painful and persistent. Okay, why should we care about that? I want you to imagine for a moment in our current world that is full of social media, fake news, and sometimes misleading information, where you cannot sometimes differentiate between what is false and what is true. If you combine all that with our brain shortcuts or unconscious bias, what could be the downside of that? Would you in your chat box type a word or two that describe what would be the downside of having blind spots combined with misleading information, like how we are living right now in the current landscape? Okay, making prejudged, biased thoughts or decisions. Thank you, Saad. Chaos. Thank you, Suhair. False reality, Rohit. Right. Wrong decisions. Thank you, Dalia. Chaos again. Fake visualization, Saleh. Yes, true. Unconstructed or unstructured plans. Thank you, Dina. Wrong decisions. Thank you, Sally. Okay, very good. All right. So the downside of that, as you said, would be we don't see everything. Sometimes or some of the information we filter out could be useful and important to us, but we don't see it. Our search for meaning can bring illusions as well. We sometimes imagine details that were filled in by our assumptions, and we create meaning and stories that are not really there. We make snap judgments, which can sometimes be wrong and might not be aligned with our values and beliefs. Also, some of the quick reactions and decisions we jump to are unfair, self-serving, or counterproductive. This can make us act in a way that have unintentional consequences for ourselves and also for other people around us. Then, why should we focus on blind spots? By bringing awareness to our unconscious minds, we can make decisions and take actions that are more aligned with our declared beliefs. You remember, we said our brain is facing 4 challenges: too much information, not enough meaning, need to act fast. What should we remember? Then our brain is handling each of those 4 challenges with some relevant shortcuts. There are more than 100 shortcuts or cognitive biases our brain is making to address those 4 challenges. And for the sake of time, we will explore a few examples of them. Now, let's explore some signals first of each challenge and some relevant shortcuts or blind spots. The first one is too much information. What happens when we have too much information? We notice things already primed in memory or repeated often in our memory. And we notice when something has changed. We are more drawn to details that confirm our own existing beliefs. We notice mistakes in other people more easily than we notice mistakes in ourselves. And we notice funny or visual striking things more than non-visual or unfunny things. Let's take some example of the shortcuts. The first one is anchoring bias. People have the tendency to judge things based on the initial information they got. And sometimes you take decision or make decisions based on that initial information you have. Let me give you an example. For example, when you see a shirt at the price of $500 US, and then you see another one at the price of $60, most probably you will judge the second one as inexpensive because you are anchoring your judgment on the initial information you have in mind. Maybe if you saw the $60 shirt only, you would judge it as expensive shirt as well. So sometimes market price tag and then discounted price tag, relying on the anchoring bias of our brain. Another example. When I ask people, what is the height of the tallest tree? I usually get one or two answers, and sometimes I get no answer at all, no answers at all. But when I ask people, is the highest tree in the world higher or are you following? I'm doubting the connection is okay. Can you, in your chat box, tell me whether you can hear me well or not?
We can hear you, Saddiq, but the presentation is not there. The screen. Can you share
okay,
it?
So all is good? Okay.
Yeah.
One second. Okay, you got me back. Okay, that's good. That's good. So I don't know whether you have heard the last point or not, but let me repeat this point again. 1 second. Can you see the screen now? No? Okay.
Not yet.
Not yet, huh? 1 second.
Yes, it's there now.
I'm trying to fix the screen again. Sorry for that. 1 minute. Okay, so you see it now. Okay, just for the sake of those people who didn't hear the first I was talking about the first bias, which is the anchoring bias, okay? So sometimes marketeers are manipulating people's judgment with this anchoring bias by showing initial price tag and then discounted price tag, relying on the anchoring bias of our brain, okay? And again, when I said, sometimes I ask people, what is the highest or the tallest tree in the world? I usually get 1 or 2 answers, and sometimes I get no answers at all. But when I ask people, is the highest tree in the world higher or lower than 50 meters? I usually start to get more answers. Why is that? Because people started to rely on the initial information I provide. And this is what we call anchoring bias. Okay. For the second bias, under too much information, let's take a little test. I want you to think what this number sequence in front of you, 2, 4, 6. What rule defines this number sequence? In your chat box, tell me which sequence met the same rule, A, B, C, or D. Okay. So I can see some C's here for the question, and again, some people are saying the voice is not there. No voice, you can't hear me now? Yes, I can hear you. Okay, that's good. So, actually, all of them fit. The simple rule was the numbers got bigger. It's likely that your unconscious mind quickly saw a pattern of even numbers that goes up by 2. And that narrowed your thinking. The dynamic, or this dynamic, is called the confirmation bias. And that confirmation bias can deprive us from other possible solutions. Many studies have shown that people are more likely to seek out information that confirm their existing beliefs. So what is confirmation bias? Confirmation bias is the tendency of people to pay close attention to the information that confirm their belief and ignore information that contradicts it. For example, we usually choose the TV news channel that reflects our views and opinions. And this confirmation bias could be dangerous for investment decisions making. When investors look only to the confirming information and neglect the disconfirming information and evidence. The third example of blind spot happens when we have too much information. It's when people tend to ignore the negative aspects of something. And our problem, we try to ignore it, thinking it will go away, or we procrastinate solving it, like quitting smoking or delaying any business decisions because it is tedious. And this is called the ostrich bias. This is a type of bias explored in behavioral finance.
our biases tend to limit our ability to make purely rational financial decisions. Sometimes you know how bad your financial situation is, but you tend to ignore checking your bank account balance or credit card balance and keep on enjoying your spending habits. Now let's move to the second challenge, which is not having enough meanings. We tend to find stories and patterns even when we look at cluttered data. We fill in characteristics from stereotypes, generalities, and prior history. We imagine things and people are familiar with or fond of as better than other people we don't know. We simply or simplify probabilities and numbers to make them easier to think about. We think we know what other people are thinking, and we project our current mindset and assumptions onto our past and future. For the first example of that blind spot due to not having enough meaning, let's test this idea. Imagine you are at a networking event. You quickly scan the room to see who's there. Which group of people would you approach? In your chat box, would it be the one that you feel have the same social identity, or the group that is far from your social identity? سعد، سهير، سالي، عبير، سارة، دينا، داليا، Maria. So first answer, most of you or most of us would definitely go to the one that we feel have the same social identity. Most people recognize the group they would be most comfortable with. The studies shows that we often gravitate towards people who are or who we think are similar to us. And this dynamic is called similarity bias. So similarity bias happens when we are drawn towards people who seem familiar or remind us of ourselves, which is okay if you are casting for a role of twin, but not okay if you need to work with others to accomplish a goal, or when you interview an applicant for a job, or when you decide to join a team for a certain project. It's natural to gravitate towards people who are like us, but making decisions only on who we are comfortable with can cause us or cause you a tunnel vision. All right. Now let's explore another blind spot. If you are going out for a dinner and you are passing by a restaurant full of people sitting and dining, and another restaurant that have only few people dining, most probably you will prefer A, the busy restaurants, or B, the restaurant with few people eating. Abir, Rola, Suhair, Sally, Dina, Saleh, Rohit. B for me. Okay, Saleh said B for me. Good for you, Saleh. Saad Nawaz said B. Maria said B. That's good. Sarah Al-Blushi said B as well. That's good. But anyway, this is another shortcut called herd mentality. Most people, not all people, but most people go for the crowd, where the restaurant is busy restaurants and full of people, because they would like to follow the crowd, maybe thinking that this restaurant is tested, people have an experience before. But let's look at it a little bit in depth. And this is called herd mentality bias, which is a tendency to follow and copy what other people are doing, influenced by emotions and instincts, rather than by own independent analysis. For example, in financial markets, when people buy stocks, they buy the stocks majority of people are buying, or when we follow certain fashion, even if this fashion is not in our culture. The key thing here is that we are wired to herd, and going against the crowd typically triggers fear in people. That's not necessarily right and may direct us to the wrong destination. Let's take another bias here. Still due to not having enough meaning. Listen carefully to me, and in your chat box, type A if you came across such dynamic, or B if you didn't come across that. Okay? Listen. When it is my success, it's my ability. When it is your success, it's only the circumstances. When it is my failure, it's due to circumstances. When it is your failure, it's your incompetence. Can you relate to that? Okay. Yeah, Abir, A. All right, most of you are or can relate to that. Very important to us because this is not true in all cultures, but it is there. And this is a bias as well. Also, is there between husbands and wives when everyone is claiming that he or she is the one managing home or raising kids, for example. Thank you for sharing your views. That's a systematic error, actually, okay? Made when people evaluate or try to find reasons or excuses for their own behaviors against how they perceive other people's behaviors. And this is what is called attribution bias, which is a tendency of people to evaluate or try to find reasons for their own behaviors and others' behaviors. As we see, attribution bias is present in everyday life. For example, when a driver cuts someone off, the person who has been cut off is often more likely to attribute blame to the reckless driver's personality traits, perceiving the driver as rude and incompetent, rather than considering it as situational circumstances that the driver may have been late to work and was not paying attention. However, if one day you have to do the same thing, you expect people to understand your circumstances. So attribution do not necessarily reflect reality and can be colored by person's own perspective. And you can imagine if you let this wrong perspective impact your relationships or the quality of the decisions you take. So this was the attribution bias. Moving to the third challenge, which is need to act fast. What happens when we need to act fast? We favor the simple looking options over complex ones. We start completing things that we have invested time and energy in to get things done quickly. We favor the immediate relevant thing in front of us. And not necessarily this is the best thing to consider, but anyway, we feel that what we're doing now is very important to us. When we need to act fast, overconfidence bias is one of the cognitive error or blind spots we have, which is the tendency to get too confident and start taking decisions not based on facts, but based on our opinions or guts, because we have been correct so many times in the past. For example, in stock trading, for example, if several times you picked a stock and turned it to be a very successful one, you think that your decision is always right And here, ego is the enemy. Just because you flip the coin 5 times and it landed on heads does not mean that the next time it will also land on head. There is a 50% chance of it landing on the tail. Let's take another example. Second example under we need to act fast is the status quo bias. It is when we prefer that the current environment and situation remain as they already are. This bias is most impactful in the decision making. When we make decisions, we tend to prefer to keep things relatively the same. People commonly resist change and see it as a threat to the status quo. They may do this because they fear change will not be in their best interest. Alternatively, they may prefer stability. For example, when employees feel that new policy or new business strategy might make their job more difficult or eventually result in the loss of their jobs, and they start putting obstacles in the way of change. Or when we apply some inherited thoughts that are not necessarily correct or right. Like, for example, believing that what we know is much better than what we don't know. So this is status quo. The fourth, now moving to the fourth challenge, which is what should we remember? When we need to know what should we remember, we store memories differently based on how they were experienced. For example, reducing events and list to their key elements only. And we discard specifics and create generalities. We edit also and reinforce some memories after the fact. We'll share some example now. So, recency effect. Recency effect is one of the cognitive errors or blind spot we have when we need to know what should we remember. It's a tendency to remember. For example, if you're trying to memorize a list of items, the recency effect means you are more likely to recall the items from the list that you studied last. In workplace context, we see that in performance review or performance management. In performance review, when supervisors recall mostly what employee did during the last few weeks. And this can give them advantage or disadvantage, depending on how they performed. Also in interviews, for example, most likely that the last person that you have met is going to stick out in your mind more than the other people you have interviewed throughout the day. Can you imagine if your brain has this shortcut in different personal or business perspective or context? Definitely, it will impact the quality of your decision process. Okay. The second example is the negativity bias. The negativity bias, also known as the negativity effect. It is the notion that things of a more negative nature, such as unpleasant thoughts, unpleasant emotion, unpleasant social interactions, or harmful events, those have greater effect on us than positive things. As an example of negativity effect on social media, for example, when the engagement level with negative and disturbing news or posts are higher than the engagement level with the positive ones. Definitely that have a great negative impact on our life. And we have to be careful with that because social media experts are using that blind spot to serve their own objectives, like marketing or creating propaganda around someone or something. So this is what we call negativity bias. All right. Now, after exploring the 4 brain challenges and some examples of their blind spot, think about it. Living our lives with blind spots can put us in a tunnel. And we can have the same point of view, same decisions, and accordingly, the same outcomes as well. We can find ourselves trapped in the land of snap judgment and misconceptions. But when we recognize our brain shortcuts, we become better critical thinker, be able to gain authority and trust, be able to reach intelligent conclusions and decisions. Okay, well, if we all been on both the giving and receiving end of blind spots, so what are some actions we can do to outsmart our unconscious mind? Here are some recommended actions that you can do. 1, accept the data that contradict your opinion as new knowledge. Explore information and views that might disprove your ideas rather than confirm what you want to do. Examine your network. Who's in it? Who's not? Don't exclude people who are not like you. Don't let one shining moment or one speed bump sway your opinion forever. Slow down your thinking. Set criteria. This can help prevent from being swayed by irrelevant factors. And lastly, you can share the why behind your decisions. This will help you double check your objectivity. So the conclusion is, blind spots are part of the human conditions. We all have blind spots. Once you accept that you have them, you can choose to do something about it. And you will be amazed at how your own perspective might change. It's time to check your blind spots and focus on what is possible to gain different perspectives, inclusive relationships, diverse network, better outcomes, seeing people for who they really are. People like you with unlimited potentials. Thank you. So this was like 40 minutes. So if you have any questions in the chat box, you can share, or you can follow us also on the facebook.com/Pentapyramid for more information about the blind spots.
Thank you, Saddiq. Thank you for the insightful presentation.
Thank you.
If there is any question, please raise your virtual hand and we will call on you, or you can send a chat message to the group, everyone, and we will read the question out loud.
Randa, you're welcome. Okay, there is a Rohit have a question here saying how to counter herd mentality. If you remember the example of the restaurant, some of the people were selecting the empty restaurants rather than the crowded one. And I think you need to give yourself the chance to give it the benefit of doubt. And when you try not to follow the herd once, there is risk involved, and it should be calculated risk. Definitely. But if you don't take risks, sometimes you will never move ahead. So in order to counter herd mentality, you need to increase your risk-taking ability. That, okay, if all people are going through this way or direction or stock or career, or you have your own analysis about it, okay? And based on your passion, based on your mentality, your culture, go for what makes you successful. Not necessarily is the same way or the same direction of the herd mentality. Sally is saying, okay, thank you. You're welcome, Sally. Aisha, you're welcome. Did I miss any questions? Rola, thank you. You're welcome, Rola.
So thank you all for participating, and we hope
All right.
you all enjoyed today's session. Our next session will be held on 29th of November at 4 p.m. We'll talk about we'll talk about the foundation of design thinking and corporate strategy. Thank you all once again, and please visit Oman Arab Bank social media pages for more information. Thank you and have a nice holiday. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You take care. Bye-bye. All the best for you, and happy National Day for Omani people.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you all.
Thank you.